Signs continue to show that the Korean economy is gradually emerging from its slowdown on the back of a recovery in manufacturing production, chip exports, and strong job figures. Having wrapped up a 5-day trip to the Netherlands, President Yoon is back home, putting the Triple Alliance with that country front and center. We take a look at what this means when global supply chain risks are high. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in Tel Aviv, pressuring Israel amid international criticism over its bombing of Gaza in a meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's December 15, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin tonight with signs continuing to show the Korean economy emerging from the doldrums. It is gradually moving away from a slowdown on the back of recovery in manufacturing production, chip exports, and strong job figures. Park Go-nu explains.
South Korea's economic slowdown is continuing to ease, according to the Finance Ministry's monthly Economic Green Book released on Friday. The ministry said the economic slowdown is gradually easing due to recovery in production and manufacturing industry exports, including semiconductors. In contrast, the report highlighted a drop in retail sales in October, as well as low economic sentiment over the previous months, while the composite consumer sentiment index for November dropped 0.9 points on month. The ministry said it would need to come up with solutions to narrow these discrepancies. At a briefing on Friday, a finance ministry official also cited global uncertainties, including geopolitical risks from ongoing wars and unstable supply chains that could hinder economic recovery, adding the government would strengthen efforts toward economic recovery despite the uncertainties.
The government will focus on stabilizing people's livelihoods, including consumer prices, and further strengthen efforts so that the export recovery expands to the whole economy.
Meanwhile, total exports in November came to $55.8 billion, an increase of 7.8% on year. By item, 12 out of 15 major export items, including ships, vehicles, and chips, saw an increase. And exports to 6 out of 9 main regions, including the US, Japan, and India, saw a jump as well. In terms of employment in November, 277,000 jobs were added on year, a smaller increase than the month before due to the base effect caused by eased COVID-19 measures. Though unemployment increased by 11,000, the unemployment rate was the same as last year at 2.3%. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
The Asian Development Bank remains optimistic about Asia's economic prospects in 2024, but acknowledges the presence of tangible risk factors. Moon Hye-ryun spoke with the bank's chief economist.
Amid external conflict and unusual weather posing challenges this year, Asia's economic outlook going into 2024 remains solid. The Asian Development Bank's December report on Wednesday showed the region's growth has been upbeat on the back of strong domestic demand and the recovery in the tourism sector. However, the agency's chief economist, Albert Park, discussed how certain trends are affecting the region's economies.
So, unfortunately, we live in a world where there's been a lot of geopolitical kind of tensions, and we've had sanction regimes, trade wars, and other industrial policies that are kind of erecting barriers to free trade. And we think that's not healthy for the region because Asia in particular historically has really benefited a lot from open trade and export-led growth.
As well as geopolitical tensions, other factors such as unusual weather and slowing global demand in certain industries have raised concerns about supply chains. South Korea has experienced food security challenges as a result of the heat wave which swept through the country this summer. And recent disruptions in urea exports from China have highlighted a need to reduce dependence on a single source of key materials.
We hope that countries can think together about how to make, number one, make agriculture more resilient to supply shocks, but then also think ahead and come up with plans where countries do not overly restrict their trade when there is a negative shock, because that really hurts the most vulnerable countries, and to think about instead protecting consumers through more targeted policy measures.
Despite these headwinds, the ADB revised its 2023 growth estimate for Asia. raising it by 0.2 percentage points from its earlier forecast in September. Its projection for South Korea remained unchanged, but the country's main export sector could be seeing a recovery.
Well, we're cautiously optimistic. Not just Korea, but the global semiconductor market has kind of bottomed out earlier this year, and we're seeing a recovery in global demand. The U.S. economy is growing a bit faster, than we had expected earlier, which helps.
With the Fed's decision to keep interest rates steady for the third consecutive month on Thursday, it's predicted to lower rates in 2024, which is welcome news for the region.
I think the lower interest rates are better for the region because high interest rates really put financial pressure. It raises the cost of capital and investment. It leads to kind of capital flowing out of the region and gives pressure on countries to raise their interest rates in response to the higher U.S. Fed rate.
With these economic trends expected to continue, governments will have to form policies targeted at sustainable growth. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
A two-day conference was held this week in Seoul, organized by South Korea's Finance Ministry, the Bank of Korea, the Financial Service Commission, and the IMF. There, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Jung-hoo emphasized that the central bank, alongside commercial banks, should also be prepared for the digitalization of the economy. He added that the pilot test of a central bank digital currency was a big step toward programming a currency that would allow for real-time settlements. The conference also called for measures to mitigate the widespread production of unregulated cryptocurrencies. This was the first time since 2017 for the South Korean government to co-host an event with the IMF. President Yoon Suk-yeol came home from his state visit to the Netherlands, where he forged a semiconductor alliance with that country, as well as increasing the scope of bilateral cooperation. Our Oh Soo-young wraps up his visit and highlights the deeper significance of the outcomes.
South Korea's new Semiconductor Alliance with the Netherlands signifies Seoul's broadening cooperation with like-minded countries as a trusted economic and security partner. That's according to diplomatic experts following President Yoon Suk-yeol's trip to the European country this week. His number one priority was securing South Korea's position in the global supply chain for semiconductors, the country's biggest export item. Thus, he formed a chip alliance with the Netherlands, as well as new dialogue channels to stabilize supply chains of critical technologies, and oversaw megadeals made between Korean chip makers Samsung and SK Hynix and Dutch chip equipment company ASML.
So microchips are the very foundation of our high-tech and increasingly digitalized world. And the Netherlands and South Korea, as advanced economies, are extremely dependent on these chips. But recent developments have shown that the semiconductor supply chain is susceptible to disruptions as a result of different bottlenecks that exist through this chain. And our countries have recognized this problem and decided to act.
The two sides also forged agreements to collaborate in green energy, artificial intelligence, quantum tech, smart agriculture, and neuroscience. This could broaden the base for South Korea to forge closer trade ties with other European markets, particularly with its plans to establish its first cold chain logistics center in Rotterdam. In taking their partnership forward, Yoon highlighted South Korea and the Netherlands' common values such as freedom and the rule of law in stabilizing trade, supply chains, and other multilateral frameworks.
So we are not major powers, and even in our own neighborhoods, there are bigger fish around us. Yet we are open economies, and for our security, we rely on our partners, on our allies, and on the rules of international law. So in other words, we depend on our international environment, but we can also influence it. We can be global pivotal states, especially if we work together and we play to our shared strengths, which I think are very similar.
Alongside economic interests, there are also security aspects of the partnership. Yoon said with the Netherlands being a core member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, stronger Korean-Dutch defense ties could help Seoul work more closely with NATO as a cooperative partner. He noted that Seoul is now part of the bloc's intel sharing system, which experts say could provide crucial insights, such as into North Korea's illegal activities and cyber attacks. South Korea and the Netherlands penned a deal on strengthening defense cooperation, with Seoul to observe Europe's largest air and missile defense exercise in 2025. They also pledged further efforts to advance global norms on the military use of AI and will host the second Re-AIM conference next year. Following Yoon's Netherlands visit, Seoul says it will aim to bolster its network of like-minded partners as it looks to become a global pivotal state. Oseong, Arirang News.
North Korea could possibly launch an ICBM sometime this month. That's according to a South Korean senior official. And Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo could start sharing a missile warning system in real time before the end of the year. Pae Eun-ji reports.
A senior presidential official has said there is a possibility that North Korea could launch an intercontinental ballistic missile this month. The first deputy chief of the National Security Office, Kim Tae-ho, said this as he arrived in Washington, D.C. for a high-profile meeting. He did not elaborate on what intelligence led him to believe so, or if related information has been shared with the U.S., but added that a ballistic missile launch using ICBM technology is a subject of extended deterrence discussions between Seoul and Washington. He also noted that regardless of the range of the ballistic missile, if a nuclear weapon is loaded onto it, it is a nuclear threat and an attack against South Korea. Kim is scheduled to take part in the second meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group, a security meeting designed to discuss nuclear and strategic planning issues between Seoul and Washington. In the meantime, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan plan to start sharing data on North Korean missiles in real time. The Pentagon spokesperson said in a briefing on Thursday local time that the three countries are working together to operationalize the system by the end of 2023.
That we are hard at work on delivering on those agreements. We are on schedule to deliver by the end of this year.
His remarks come a day after the White House National Security Council Senior Director for East Asia and Oceania, Mira Rapp-Hooper, said the data sharing system is expected to become operational within the next few days. Earlier in August, the leaders of the three countries agreed to step up efforts to counter evolving North Korean nuclear missile threats. Pae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to the war between Israel and Hamas, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was in Tel Aviv on Thursday, meeting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He has reportedly pressured Israel to lower the intensity of its military campaign in Gaza. But Israel says it'll continue the fighting until complete victory. Kim Jong-sil has the latest.
U.S. President Joe Biden's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday in Israel.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very much looking forward to this meeting, and you have the support of the United States as you take on this terrorist threat.
But the details of their meeting haven't been revealed. Several U.S. media outlets reported that the U.S. Security Advisor brought a message from the U.S. president pushing Israel to lower the intensity of military actions in Gaza as soon as possible. Sullivan's visit came just days after Biden said at a fundraiser that Israel was losing international support because of what he called its indiscriminate bombing. But after the meeting, the Israeli Prime Minister hadn't changed his stance.
We are more determined than ever to continue fighting until Hamas is eliminated, until complete victory.
Reuters cited a senior U.S. official who said Sullivan would meet the president of the Palestinian National Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, in the West Bank city of Ramallah on Friday, where he will likely discuss, quote, ongoing efforts to revamp and revitalize the Palestinian Authority. The official added the Palestinian Authority will look to ultimately have a role in Gaza. Meanwhile, at least 179 people had been killed in Israeli attacks over the past day, according to Gaza's Hamas-run Ministry of Health on Thursday. The ministry says the total death toll in Gaza is now more than 18,700 since the war began on October 7th. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
European Union member states reached a tentative agreement on the group's 12th package for sanctions against Russia in support of Ukraine, following the 27 member countries' agreement on Thursday, including Austria, which held back until the last minute. The measure to ban the import of Russian diamonds will take effect on January 1st. The sanctions include a phased ban on diamond imports from third countries starting in March, in alignment with G7 nations and better enforcement of an oil price cap. This follows a previous agreement by the European Union to start membership talks with Ukraine. More and more young people in Korea seem to think that marriage is no longer a must, especially women in their 20s. That's according to the latest social trend survey, coming at a time when the nation is facing a chronic demographic challenge. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
Young people in South Korea are losing interest in getting married. According to a report released Friday by Statistics Korea on societal trends, the number of people in their 20s and 30s who either believe that marriage is necessary or think that it's better to get married has been steadily declining since 2008. And more young women than men were found to have a more negative view about getting married. The proportion of women in their 20s who answered that marriage was necessary came to 27.5% in 2022. A sharp drop from the more than 50% who thought so in 2008, while the number for those in their 30s plunged to 31.8% from also more than 50%. Over the same period, the share of men in their 20s that believed that marriage was essential plunged from almost 72% to 41.9%, and for those in their 30s from nearly 70% to 48.7%. This means that only around 3 out of 10 women in their 20s and around 4 out of 10 men in their 20s believed marriage was necessary. Financial issues, namely not having enough money for a wedding and a place to live, were the #1 reason across all age groups for not getting married. And this answer was the most prevalent among those in their 20s and 30s. This is largely in line with why, for the first time, the annual median income of households with people in their 60s surpassed that of those in their 20s in 2021. Annual median income in 2021 compared to 2018 also fell by 7.4% for those in their 20s, but surged 22.5% for those aged 60 and above. People in their 20s were the only age group that saw a decline in income in 2021 compared to 4 years ago. The report is the latest in a series of gloomy demographic-related data released by the Statistics Agency. Earlier this week, it said that South Korea's population is expected to plummet to around 36 million by 2072 from the current 51.6 million. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
From the end of this month in South Korea, there will no longer be coronavirus screening stations at public health centers. The government on Friday announced the decision to end free COVID-19 screening clinics, which had been running since January 2020. Authorities attributed the closure to the recent significant drop in the number of tests taken. But the national coronavirus crisis readiness level will remain at caution due to seasonal factors in the winter. Kiwoom Heroes center fielder Lee Jung-hoo has signed a 6-year Major League Baseball contract worth $113 million with the San Francisco Giants. The deal is the largest for a South Korean player moving to the MLB through posting, surpassing the 6-year, $36 million deal that pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers in late 2012. The contract includes an opt-out clause after the 2027 season, allowing the now 25-year-old to become a free agent. The son of KBO legend Lee Jong-bum, the Junior Lee, was named the league's most valuable player in 2022. It is time for our weekly arts and culture segment. We have our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin in the studio. Welcome, Yoo-jin.
Great to be here, Jungmin.
What do you have for us today?
Well, Jungmin, as you know, a few days ago I traveled to Gangwon province to take a look at how the preparations are going for the Youth Winter Olympic Games Gangwon 2024, and I realized that it's been 6 years since Korea hosted its first ever Winter Olympics.
Yoo-jin, we're all familiar with the Olympics, but how is the Youth Olympics different?
Well, that's a great question because I also got to know what the Youth Olympics are through Gangwon 2024. So essentially, it's like the Olympics, the same sports, the same International Olympic Committee in charge. The difference is that it's for athletes between 15 and 18 years old. So with a little more than a month left until the games kick off for this week, let's take a look into the Youth Olympics and specifically Gangwon 2024. Chang Yubin and Lee So-won have just finished their final exams, but they have no time to spare. The two high school curlers are representing Korea at the upcoming Winter Youth Olympic Games Gangwon 2024.
I first got to know curling through the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, and since then, it's really taken off thanks to Team Kim. We also hope we can spread curling to the world this time.
Around 1,900 athletes will take part in the fourth Winter Youth Olympic Games, which is being held in Asia for the first time. While it may not match the grand scale of the regular Olympics, the Youth Olympic Games is fueled by a broader vision. It's not just about the medals.
Gangwon 2024's official slogan is Grow Together. We hope participants can learn the Olympic values, collaborate and harmonise with each other. Beyond the races, we aim to provide education programs and events so that they can explore other cultures.
For some, the Games marks their first step onto the international stage. But whether you're competing or not, everyone is part of something bigger.
Even though it's my first international competition, considering my experience and practice at the Pyeongchang Sliding Center, I'm confident I'll race well.
Being a forerunner for the Olympics, my dream stage is an honor in itself.
More than 340 Winter Youth Olympic Games athletes have become Olympians, winning over 60 medals. And Gangwon 2024 is set to add another chapter to this rich legacy, with competitions at venues used during the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Young athletes will have the chance to follow in the footsteps of their Olympic heroes.
When hosting the Olympics, the most significant investments tend to revolve around infrastructure, primarily the sports facilities, and then social infrastructure, such as accommodation facilities.
In 2018, it was about fostering connections through a shared passion. 6 years later, it's about the next generation growing together so they can shine forever.
A stage for promising young athletes. Yoo-jin, you brought something here. What is that?
You're right, Jongmin. So this is actually the official mascot of Gangwon 2024. Its name is Bungcho, and its name comes from the Korean verb 뭉치다, which means to gather as one. So Bungcho, it's a snowball that Seoul and Bandabi, the mascots of Pyeongchang 2018, used in a snowball fight. Now, the organizing committee says there are no winners or losers in snowball fights, so Bungcho really encourages all participants to enjoy and embrace every moment of the games. Now, what's interesting is that this character was created by a Korean college student and was chosen among the more than 600 candidates which were submitted through a nationwide contest.
It's cute. I love it.
It is.
And tell us a bit more about Gangwon 2024.
Well, the opening ceremony, it will start with the opening ceremony. It will run until from January 19th to February 1st across Gangneung City, Cheongseong-gun, Pyeongchang-gun, and Hwaengseong-gun counties in Gangwon province. The opening ceremony will take place simultaneously at the Gangneung Oval and Pyeongchang Dome on January 19th. And during this time, you can enjoy an array of cultural events like DJ skate night, lessons from Olympians, and snow tube riding. And I've noticed that many aren't really aware the Youth Olympics is happening here in Korea next month. All events except the opening ceremony are indeed free, and I'll be on site in Gangwon province next month covering the games, so please stay tuned for our station's coverage of the games as well.
We'll look forward to that. Thank you, Yoo-jin.
Thank you.
The morning temperature in Seoul was 5 degrees Celsius today, but it will drop to minus 3 degrees tomorrow. And on Sunday, it will plummet to minus 11 degrees, the lowest temperature this winter. Due to the cold wind, the wind chill tomorrow will make it feel like it's below minus 10. As the Arctic cold wave heads south, a cold wave warning will be issued nationwide tomorrow. Meanwhile, rain returning to snow in Seoul and other parts of the country in the sub-zero cold. There will be a heavy snow on the west coast and Jeju Island. Please pay attention to safety to avoid any accidents. Tomorrow morning in Seoul will start off at minus 3 degrees. Daytime highs will stay at minus 3 in Seoul. Gwangju will reach 2 degrees, Busan 7 degrees Celsius. The extreme cold of around minus 10 degrees is expected to continue until next week, so we need to prepare for major temperature changes ahead. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.